So we'll jump right in with what is enrichment. So enrichment involves mentally and physically stimulating the dog in many different activities, things that might stimulate their mind, body, or their different senses, smell, taste, touch, all of that good stuff. So there's actually a couple different categories that enrichment can fall into. And an enrichment activity doesn't have to fall into just one of these. It might fall into a bunch of them. Cognitive enrichment is going to be things that involve that mental stimulation. So that might be doing a training session with the dog, or working on a problem solving task like playing hide and seek where they need to find you, that kind of thing. Environmental enrichment is going to involve exposing them to different environmental complexities. So that might mean going out on a walk in a new environment, going to a new park, letting them explore new toys, that kind of thing. Feeding enrichment, pretty straightforward. That involves chewing or eating something. So that might be your puzzle feeders or frozen Kongs, other kind of toys that we fill with food, something that they can consume or at least chew on, something that involves their mouth. Musical enrichment is exactly like it sounds. That is sound-based. Usually when we talk about musical enrichment, we're talking about like classical music or some kind of dog music type playlist. There's many of them on YouTube or all the streaming services that you can pull up. They might have outdoor noises like animals, rainstorms, that kind of thing. And for little puppies, that's also really great socialization for them to get used to those different noises. Scent enrichment is things that involve their nose. So it might mean snuffle mats or toys that are scented. Maybe they're scented like peanut butter or bacon or something like that. Or even letting them smell different things outside. Social enrichment is something that allows them to interact with other dogs, other people, or other animals. Now, when we're talking about socializing, that doesn't need to mean that they're playing with those people or animals, right? Even being in the same space with dogs or other animals and just getting to take in what they're doing is still a form of social enrichment for them. So when we're thinking about enrichment and we're going through all these examples, keep these categories in mind. Some things might tick a bunch of these boxes, right? Going for a training walk around the neighborhood is going to be cognitive enrichment. It's going to be environmental enrichment. If we throw in a sniff break, maybe that's scent enrichment as well, right? So they can tick a bunch of these boxes. It doesn't have to be one or the other. You might find a super awesome form of enrichment that ticks all of these boxes, right? But it's good to diversify our enrichment and think of these different categories when we're looking for new things to do with our learners. Amy, do you want to pop to the next one? So why would we do enrichment? I think there's a big hint in the description. It's a really great way to tire your learner or your NSD service dog out. It works their brain and provides them with mental stimulation. It also activates the pleasure centers of your dog's brain, getting to fulfill their needs in all these different ways. So you're promoting happiness, you're alleviating boredom because we're tiring them out, you're promoting calmness, and maybe reducing some not so pleasant behaviors in little puppies if we haven't learned our house manners and stuff like that yet. Doing these activities with your furry friends also is going to strengthen your bond. It helps solidify positive experiences. So it is in and of itself a form of a reward, right? So if we're out on that walk and then you let them go for a sniff break, that's a reward. That's positive reinforcement as well as scent enrichment. Giving them these outlets also helps reduce their stress. So as we know, these guys are on the go a lot. They live a very different life than some of our pet friends, and inherently they're gonna take on some stress, whether that's taking on stress from the people that they're supporting or whether it's just day to day, we exposed them to something, it was a little too much, they got a little stressed out. So throwing in these forms of enrichment can help reduce that stress that inevitably they're going to take in from time to time. It's also a really great way to boost their confidence, right? So when we're giving them puzzle toys, they're working on problem solving and figuring this out on their own. When we're letting them explore their spaces, they're going off and making choices on their own. So it's a great way to give your dog a lot of choice and boost their confidence in a number of different ways. Next one. So I know you guys cannot read that tiny little text up there, that was by design, but this just shows you our welfare assessment tool. So if you guys are a client on the call, you will have seen the welfare assessment tool in team training. If you're, yep, Danny.
It's on the website.
It is also on the website if you guys want to go look. But for our volunteers, this is something we send home with clients. It is kind of a tool to help them check in and see what needs are being met for their friend. So it's broken down into a couple different categories: nutrition, environment, so the environment that they're living in, what is the condition of it, their physical health, so like their body condition and stuff like that, their behavioral interactions, so what kind of interactions are they getting day to day, right? Are they being screamed at, or are they being rewarded for their things, talked to in a nice tone, those kind of things. And then positive mental experiences. So that's the one I want to highlight here. In all of these categories, we obviously are aiming for that green category. That's where we're meeting those needs, and having all of them in that green category is going to result to that score being thriving. And that would be the goal for all of our dogs in training, all of our dogs out in service. We want them all to be thriving in the day-to-day. So if we go down to the green zone of our positive mental experiences one, there is a couple different things. I'll let you guys read up if you can, but the big piece there is part of that criteria is enrichment as part of their everyday. So every single day they're getting some form of enrichment, and it doesn't have to be huge, right? We talked about all those different forms of enrichment. Maybe it's just a sniffy walk, or a portion of their walk is a sniff break. They still got some form of enrichment that day. They got to relieve some stress, got to fulfill a need, right? It doesn't have to be some giant undertaking, but making sure that they're getting some form of enrichment so they do have those outlets is a big piece of making sure they're having positive mental experiences throughout their entire life and their working career. Next one. So when you guys are planning your enrichment, there's a couple things we want you to take into consideration. Amy is going to take over for me in a second, and she's going to go through a lot of super great ideas, but we want you to know that not every form of enrichment is for every single dog. Enrichment is not a one size fit all. It's really something that needs to be tailored to your dog or your learner. It is about them first and foremost. So we want to make sure that we're picking a form of enrichment that they're going to love and that is fulfilling a need that they have, right? If your friend loves to sniff, if they have a very hard time out walking and they just want to sniff, 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 sniff breaks are going to be a great form of enrichment for them. But if you have a friend that you could tell them to go sniff and they'd maybe sniff for a second and then come back because they just want to work with you, well, that's not as fulfilling for them, right? So we need to know our friend and pick a form of enrichment that's going to meet the needs they have. And we also want to know where their threshold lies. So if you have a friend that doesn't super love to problem solve, and you give them a frozen Kong and you notice they lick the first portion of it for like 5 minutes and then they'll walk away and it's still completely full. Well, that source of enrichment is just too frustrating for your learner, and it's no longer fulfilling for them. So we need to make it easier. Maybe that Kong is filled with food that isn't frozen, or the first half is frozen and the first half is thawed and the second half is frozen, right? Take some of that challenge out if they're getting a little too frustrated. We have staff dogs or dogs on program. Some of them love snuffle mats. Some of them have no desire to eat out of a snuffle mat and will straight up walk away from it because they're like, that's too hard. I don't want to do that. Right. So think about what your learner does. You can try lots of things, but if they're telling you that it's not something they love, they're walking away really quickly and giving up, then maybe you need to help them make that a little easier, try something else, because it should challenge them in some way, right? But it shouldn't be frustrating them. If you put a treat that's too big in a toy and they can never get it out, well, that's just going to be frustrating. That's no longer fulfilling a need. On top of that, I'll just leave you with try and vary your enrichment quite a bit, right? So back to that challenging piece and meeting their needs. Dogs usually have lots of different needs. They can change over time. And if we keep presenting them with the exact same form of enrichment, they're going to get bored of that pretty fast, right? So change out your form of enrichment. We're not just giving them a Kong every single day. Maybe it's a Kong and then it's a snuffle mat and then it's a walk or a car ride or something like that, right? Lots of different things for them to take in and see, filling a number of different needs, and try and limit the rules. We still want our friends to have manners, and they need to wait for us to tell them they can take that food or that food toy. That's totally okay. But as they're participating in the enrichment, as long as they're minding their manners, let them choose, let them do their thing, right? A lot of enrichment is their time to just be a dog and blow off some steam. If you were gonna go for a massage or go to the gym as your stress relief, right? You probably wouldn't want somebody standing there being like, why are you running on the treadmill? No, you need to go lift weights right now. Now you need to go get on a bike, right? You're like, no, I would like to relieve stress this way. So let your learner have choice. Let them pick the thing that's going to make them happy and meet their needs the best. You're just there in a supporting role, providing those outlets. All right, so I will pass it over to Amy now to give you guys lots of great ideas of how we can give them different enrichment outlets.
Okay, so one of the big reasons why we chose to do this enrichment knowledge nibble is because we, as you know, place service dogs all across Canada. So we do have some clients and service dogs that live in some pretty cold areas of the country, and they had reached out and said, hey, like sometimes it just gets too cold to go on a walk or even play in the backyard. So, what are some other options that we have to enrich or exercise our dog within the home to keep them nice and stimulated and happy and healthy? So, we thought there's kind of two categories for enrichment, which would be activities for outside of the home. So on summer days or on winter days where it's not too bad and you still want to get out of the house, then we have some ideas for how you can do some enrichment outside of the home. And then counter to that, if it's a day that's just too cold or too snowy and you still want to engage in some enrichment activities with your dog, we have some options for enrichment activities inside the house as well, and for small spaces. So this enrichment really can be accomplished even if you live in a small apartment or if you're just staying inside your house for the day. Okay, so for some activities outside of the home, of course, outings are always an option. Our volunteers, you have public access with your learners, and clients, of course, you have public access. So outings are always a great idea. Just some options would be a library or a mall walk, because then you can still keep it moving, just do a couple laps around the mall, which is always nice. Some community centers even have walking tracks. So if that's something of interest to you, if you just want to get moving because you've been cooped up inside for a couple winter days and you just want to walk around, that could be a good idea. or relaxing in a nice cafe. I like to do this with puppies in training or my ambassador dog because cafes are very stimulating with tons of different smells, people, food on the floor, and even some pet-friendly cafes will have other dogs walk in. So those are all great ways to train or enrich the dog. I guarantee you, after a visit to a cafe, your puppy or service dog will be quite tired. In all these places, you can, of course, practice your skills, skills that the puppies in training are learning, or things that you and your service dog like to practice. So that's always a good option. If you don't just want to walk in a circle around a mall, you can practice any sort of skill that you're working on in that public place. And then, yeah, you can just increase your walking speed to increase your heart rate and your dog's heart rate. To get that kind of going, make it really worth your while. Car rides are really exciting for dogs. There's lots of sights and smells to take in. We don't typically recommend, opening the window wide when you're going down the 400 series highway, but if you choose to maybe park the car and, keep an eye on your dog and open the window a little bit and let them sniff out, then there's lots of sights and scents to take in that way. Sniffy walks on a long line are always a great option if it's not too slippery outside, or again, if it's summertime we're talking about. Sniffing is very stimulating and tiring for dogs. For our current puppies in training and for our most recent service dogs, we have the go sniff cue, where you have them sit and then they say go sniff, and then they have their time to just kind of let loose and sniff and go be a dog. So that's a great option. Even if there are any clients that have had their service dog for a while and your dog doesn't necessarily know that cue, I know our labs are always willing and eager to learn new things. So I do think it's something that you could easily introduce to your dog, even if they don't already know it. And that's a great enrichment opportunity for them. So you can always try it on your own. Just say, Fido, go sniff, and allow them some time. Or if your dog doesn't know that cue, you can always reach out to us and we can help you kind of kickstart that. But the go sniff cue is a really good option for when you're on leash. And then if you tell them to go sniff and you just walk on your long line, then they can have, as much or as little time as your learner can tolerate or handle while being appropriate. And then you can always bring them back to have a nice loose leash walk. And then there's also something called sniff spots, which I've learned about recently. So Emma tells me it's an app where you can rent a private or a dog safe space. So I'm kind of thinking of it as like an Airbnb sort of thing. You download sniff spots and then you can rent out a room, or I think I've heard of people even renting out their backyard with a pool, and you can book whatever space it is, pool or room, and you can go and spend some time with your dog like that. So it's just nice because it gives you some of that privacy and control over the situation, rather than going to a dog park where you honestly have, very little control over all the other pet dogs that are around. So like a dog park, but better and controlled. Here in KW, we also have something called an organization called KW Dog Friendly, and they have an event right now called Sniffscape, where they have, I think, a warehouse with a bunch of different rooms and activities for your dog to go in and explore and sniff around and try new things. So if you're in the KW area, definitely give that a chance, or give that a look. But if you're not in the KW area, maybe just explore your community for other opportunities like that, or sniff spots, or if you have other like dog-friendly communities and activities that go on in your area, that's always a great option. And you and your dog might make a couple new friends along the way, which is never a bad thing. Okay, so moving on to inside the home, you're having a lazy day, it's a cold day outside, you can still keep enriched and keep active. So there's a couple things here that we can talk about. So the first thing would be two-person recall. So if you have like yourself and another person in the home that want to play this fun game, it's stimulating and is some cardio. So basically, you would just have your dog with you, and then the other person says, Fido, come, and the dog would come running, and you reward them, and you can do this back and forth a couple times. Pretty fun, pretty good cardio. You might have to take it step by step so the dog doesn't maybe get lost, depending on who your learner is or how good their recall is at this point in their careers or lives. So you might have to start, both people are in the same room, and then you can move different rooms in the house, or maybe even upstairs or downstairs, just being mindful that everyone's being safe on the stairs and not going to hurt themselves. So that's something that's fun about all these enrichment activities, is a lot of the times you might have to start somewhere, but then you and your dog are just going to get better and better, and then you can increase the difficulty, and it'll just be more fun. So that's two-person recall, back and forth, kind of like a little ping pong ball. Hide and seek is a nice fun one. Maybe our people who have autism service dogs might also like this one. So basically, you just ask your dog to wait, and then you grab a little treat and you go hide somewhere. Again, not anywhere too crazy. Like, you're not going to go hide on the roof of the house, or you know what I mean? Like, just, you're going to hide behind the door or in the bathtub, somewhere where they can actually find you. And then you say, Fido, come. And then they have to sniff around the house and figure out where you are. Here, they have to smell you out where you might be hiding. And if they're struggling a little bit, you can always encourage them, like verbally, or make a little tap on the door, or a little like noise, or over here sort of thing. So they have a reminder or a little hint of where you're at. But then eventually they find you, you can give them a little cookie, and then it's a big party, and it's all sorts of fun and games. So that's a fun one. I really like to do that one. Indoor homemade agility. Everyone loves a good pillow fort. So I'm thinking anything from some piled up couch cushions, or if you can use like a broomstick as a limbo, or jump over anything. I'm sure you can get very creative, but just putting some, or even like the Dollarama has those tunnels that are on the screen there, which is kind of fun. So anything that you can think of, you can even make a tunnel with your kitchen chairs. So I don't know, yeah, get creative and maybe even send me a picture, but kind of like an indoor maze, indoor playground. That one's always fun to get a little creative with that one. I personally really love a backyard snow maze. I always shovel my snow into a big pile, and then I throw Sadie's ball over the snow and make her jump over it. I call it the backyard Olympics. So as long as it's not too cold, or there's not too much snow to play in your backyard, that's a good one. I guess I know it's not technically inside the home, but you get the idea. So yeah, anything you can think of with the snow would be a good idea. I sometimes even use the snow as a snuffle mat. So again, this is nice and controlled. We always like to have our dogs, go for food on cue, whether we say okay or release or take it. We have kind of a modge podge of clients and volunteers here. So whatever your dog's release cue is, you can hide some kibbles in the snow and then say take it, or whatever the word is, and then they can go sniff around and use the snow as a very, very easy snuffle mat. So that's a fun one as well. One that is truly inside the home instead of backyard snow maze. You can practice skills inside your house, but add some distractions. So if you have a good skill that you're working on, like you can just make it a little bit more difficult. Maybe you have some family members walk by, or if you have another pet and they walk by, or maybe you can even roll a ball or introduce some food on the floor around you. And not only are they performing the skill, but they're ignoring all these extra distractions around them. So that's very, very stimulating and hard work. And it is great for their brains and also proofs their skills. So you know that skill is going to be really solid no matter what gets thrown at them, whether it be a pet cat or a big old treat. Tug is always a fun one for some indoor fun. A little reminder to keep it safe and not too rowdy. If things get a little bit too out of control, we can always end the playtime. That's totally okay, but it's always nice to just kind of let loose and practice that tug instinct. That's always a popular one with most of our dogs, I would say. Something else I like to do is toy rotation. So, of course, my dog has a toy bin full of toys. I'm not embarrassed about that at all, but I do a toy rotation, and it just keeps things exciting and new. There's different toys. So I put half of my dog's toys away and I keep half of them out. And every couple weeks or so, I'll trade in a couple toys. So maybe, oh, it must be 7 o'clock. The other clock is going. So yeah, maybe for a couple weeks you're playing with your tug toy, or then maybe you have stuffies or some squeaky toys. But yeah, it's just exciting and enriching to figure out a new toy again without you constantly buying new stuff and new enrichment toys, or new puzzles too. I like to rotate. Maybe your dog will spend a week or two figuring out one puzzle, and then it gets kind of easy, so you pull out another puzzle and switch back and forth just to keep it interesting. And then that one puzzle is not going to become like moot or not interesting because it's too easy. So that's kind of a simple one, but a good one to keep in mind to keep things interesting. A little bit more about enrichment toys. We love a good Kong here at NSD. We always advocate for Kongs for our puppies, our service dogs, even our personal dogs. It's always a great idea. They can be frozen, and those usually last a lot longer, or they can be unfrozen. Again, it depends on your dog, depends on your goal. It's supposed to be stimulating, not frustrating. So if it needs to be unfrozen, then that's totally great. It still gets that licking action going and that stimulation. So Kongs are a great option, and there's tons of recipes online in our team training handbook for our clients out there. There's already some recipes in that handbook, but you can, essentially do anything that's dog friendly. So if you make some kibble mush, add some bananas, peanut butter, whatever else is, I like to put coconut oil in there as well. As you saw earlier in the slides, there was some green beans in some of those Kongs there. So get creative, keep it fun. You can keep it festive. That's always fun. West Paw toys are just another brand of stuffable toys. So same kind of idea as Kongs. They can be frozen, unfrozen. Unless I'm mistaken, it's just a different brand of stuffable toys. So a towel or a sheet is a pretty clever one. It's pretty low cost, especially if you already have some towels at home. You basically just lay your towel out flat, and you sprinkle a couple kibble all over the towel, and then you roll it up with the kibbles inside. And then you give your dog the release cue. Okay, release, take it. And then they can sniff around to get all the kibbles out from inside the sheet. And they have to figure out how to unroll the towel and get all the good kibbles in there. And again, you can get creative with how you're rolling up the sheet, or maybe you're tying the sheet or putting it. Maybe you can do some really fancy like towel origami, and you can make a fancy swan with your towel and shove some kibble in there. I don't know. But yeah, there's tons of stuff you can do even with just a towel at home. Snuffle mats are pretty popular, pretty easy. They're just like a mat, but with a bunch of like felt fingers almost. And then you put your kibble in there, and the dog has to use their nose to sniff out all the kibble. So those are great options. And again, just a reminder to put it on cue. It says go sniff there, but I probably meant release or take it instead of go sniff. So whatever your dog's release cue, again, just to keep those nice manners around food and toys. We're not kind of busting through the door to get to the snuffle mat. We'll sit and then take it. There's tons of puzzles out there. You can just go to whatever pet store or whatever Amazon and get some pretty good puzzle. And they actually have levels. So they have like level 1, 2, 3, 4, which would be the difficulty. So yeah, depending on your learner or a dog's needs or abilities or interests, you can get an easier one or a hard one. So that's pretty simple, just to go out and buy one. Or if you're feeling creative, you can make your own puzzle. I've seen a lot online. People will get a muffin tin and put some kibble inside each of the like muffin areas, and you put a ball on top of each of the muffins, and then your dog has to figure out how to like kick out the ball in order to get to the treat underneath. Or I've even seen kind of like the idea of a Kong where you put some kibble or liquid or mush, whatever, in the muffin tin and freeze it, and then your dog has to take the time to lick out all the different muffins in the tin. There's a ton of different options online for DIY puzzles. There's this cool thing where you can attach some plastic bottles with kibbles inside onto like a rod, and then they have to spin the bottle around the rod in order to get the kibble to come out the top of the bottle. You feel free to Google that one if I'm not entirely making sense, but there's a ton of options. It's really fun. So yeah, just look into DIY dog puzzles. Those are always, well, maybe not always, depending on your learner, but they're quite exciting for a lot of dogs. And again, you can get creative. I think that's my favorite thing about enrichment is you really can get creative and tailor things to whatever your dog likes. And then, yeah, treat balls are a good one too. So typically what treat balls look like is they're a ball you stuff with treats, and then the dog has to either roll them around with their nose or their paw to get the kibble to come out. Okay, so just I wanted to give a little bit of a reminder about treating and training. We can absolutely use food as an enrichment tool, and we can have a lot of fun with it. But we also want to be mindful with how much we're feeding our dog. Probably the idea of enrichment is to keep the dog healthy, fit, happy, stimulated, not to all of a sudden, gain 1,000,000 pounds because we're doing a lot of food enrichment. So just a friendly reminder to be mindful about that. If your dog is getting 2 cups of food daily, they can always have half a cup at breakfast. And then for your enrichment activities, they can eat up to the other 1.5 cups worth of food or a Kong mush or whatever it is for the enrichment activities. If you have any food allotment left over, they can have that for dinner. So the amount would vary depending on how much food you're using throughout the day for treating, for enrichment. So you could have a 1/4 cup left over, you could have a full cup left over, or you could have nothing left over because you've used all of your food for enrichment and training throughout the day. And if you have no food left over, that's okay. Maybe they get like a couple little kibbles in their bowl at the end of the day, just for that routine and just to kind of have them at ease that you've had all your dinner. Or if your dog's really routine, it's like, okay, here's your little handful. That's okay. But we always say it's more about the overall calories, not like breakfast, lunch, and dinner. So if your dog's getting the full 2 cups of food, it doesn't really matter how or when it's being ingested, just as long as it is being ingested. So yeah, just a little reminder to be a bit mindful. But in the same breath, if you've gone on a 2-hour hike, or if you've been at Sniffscape all day long, or whatever it is, if you've spent a really long day out snowshoeing with your dog, it's not going to be the end of the world. It might even be helpful if you give them a little bit of extra food, just because if they've expelled a lot of energy or a lot of calories, they'll need a couple extra calories coming in. So it's just like if you or if I were to run a marathon today, which will not happen, by the way, because I have a injured leg. But if I was to go and run a marathon today, I might want a little extra whatever, a little extra snack, a little cupcake, or maybe a little extra half portion at dinner. That doesn't mean that I get to go out and eat 6 Big Macs, unfortunately, because I went for a run that day, but maybe my body does need a little bit extra. So just to be mindful about not going too overboard with all the enrichment food, but a little bit extra wouldn't hurt. And on some busy days, it might actually be helpful. And just a final couple things are some resources. So Bindy's Bucket List is a really cool website. From the website, it says browser site to find recipes, enrichment inspiration, and tips and tricks on how to create a happier life for your dog. So that website has lots of Kong recipes or other like puzzle recipes, enrichment games. They might even have some like DIY tips on how to make some of the enrichment toys that I've been talking about in the past couple minutes, like the bottle thing. So yeah, just check it out. There's some good ideas. Some you might like, some you might not, but it's always worth a try. And then the Kong website is also pretty cool because it gives you a bunch of different recipes for you to stuff your Kong or West Paw toy with. And I did see that they also have webinars and other stuff like that. So just some extra learning for you and your dog, and just extra stuff for you to get up to. And I think that might actually be it. It is.
And if you are a science nerd and like studies, Bindy's Bucket List also has links to a lot of different studies that talk more about the benefits of enrichment that's been proven over and over again. So if you like that kind of stuff, there's a lot of stuff there as well. Does anyone have any questions about enrichment, or if you have enrichment ideas that you found super helpful and want to share with the group, by all means, pop yourself off mute, let us know. No takers. Alrighty then. If nobody has any questions, then we'll wrap up.
I just want to say thank you guys for pulling that together. I had a quick peruse through the SniffSpot website at sniffspot.com, and there's tons of locations listed for Ontario. So the link is in the chat while we're still active here if people want to grab it. It looks pretty cool. Same with the West Paw Topples. I had never seen those before. So they've got some really super cool stuff on their website. And thank you guys for pulling all this together. It's nice to have fun stuff to do with your dogs that's not all about work. And as you guys said, it supports their training. So it's all good stuff. So thank you guys.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to think about all the fun things we're going to get up to over the winter.
Well, what's left of winter. All right, guys. Thank you.
Thank you.
Have a good night, everyone.